Okay, so the procedure and what I did, as it said before, this is the proposal, so a little bit different than what actually ends up happening. And again, those are variables you can't control, things like seniors being out or field trips or things like that. So there were 2 sections of both courses for total. Students in both groups across the 2 courses, which again were economics and world history, will be instructed using the same subject matter with a similar pedagogy, meaning that the 2 sections of econ are taught the same way, same content, same teaching style. 2 sections of world history taught the same way. It's a pre-test, post-test model. There are actually 2 pre-tests and 2 post-tests for 2 different units. There was supposed to be 6 weeks of instruction, but what I found is that the economics students end up getting closer to like 3.5 or 4 weeks, and the students in the world history class end up getting about 5.5, so real close to that 6. Each group was given 3 20-minute instructional lessons per week on the MELs, and that included everything from starting out with evidences and finding out what a model was and a learning target, to drawing arrows, to writing justifications and all kinds of different things there. The students were taught on the same day, at roughly the same time. So if we did the first 20 minutes of class, it was first hour, 5th hour, whatever, they got the first 20 minutes for each of those 4 sections to try to keep it equivalent. And then to make sure that the prompts were used during the post-test, the question will require some knowledge gained during the time intervention. So it's not only that they didn't have that knowledge before, but also the impact of teaching the learning target through the MEL. So here's the assessment, and the pre-test, post-test will be scored on a rubric. This is a rubric that looked at several different types of things, including grammar and things. Again, since this was a proposal, this was the proposed rubric. The team went back through, the committee went back through, and we actually ended up using a different rubric. So this is an example of what a rubric could look like. The rubric I actually did end up using came from the NEIU, and it's really a little more robust than what we have here, and it gave more information towards the critical analysis as opposed to things like grammar and capitalization. So kind of switched to the content versus the grammar, which was actually what was needed. And because of that, we had to use the interrater. The interrater is, like I said before, the guidance counselor who had taught social studies for 16 years before that. And so we worked together at the end of the school year and went through and each graded some assignments separately, talked about them, had similar scores, had the same score actually, and talked about why we thought they were, why students measured there. And now we'll take our time to grade them individually, get back together and talk a little bit more. And rubrics just made this a little more subjective. It also gave the idea of giving us hard evidence. So the anticipated results, and these, like I said, I'm not sure what the results are yet. I'm still going through the assessment process, but it's anticipated that students who truly applied themselves in both the content and the procedure for completing the MELs will grow in their critical thinking skills, and that'll be proven through an increase in their rubric score, especially in supporting data from their thesis statement. The study will expose students to a new style of analyzing information presented within specific contents or learning standards, which students will be more likely to question evidence and explore topics with a critical eye or viewpoint. And the critical thinking skills of the students will be enhanced through the process of exploring content with critical viewpoints of supporting data. It'll allow the students to generalize this skill into other sectors of their life, including other courses like English or science, social media, informational text like the newspaper or a magazine, which hopefully will have students looking at things with a little bit more critical lens. Some concerns or limitations, as I mentioned before, things that were out of my control, including, the amount of time that ended up being the research time. So some of the concerns and limitations was it was impossible to directly measure students' effort or willingness. So, you couldn't directly give them some way to measure their attitude towards it. That's why I had them write the justifications. It's essential to note any student that's not participating or giving their best effort that you can tell. And sometimes you can do that and sometimes you can't. We've all been in the classroom as teachers. We know that. Students tend to miss school for a multitude of reasons. So what I did and what I was concerned about was when were they going to get that instruction. And so we had MTSS time, and I brought them in and retaught them the same stuff, nothing more, nothing less than what their classmates got, to make sure that stayed a consistent amount of time, which allowed differentiation in the teaching of the MEL usage. Not really concerned for the content because differentiation is already used. So more of a concern with how do we make sure that everyone's getting equal amounts of time with the MEL. And then students' writing styles will differ. So I was a little concerned or had a limitation of things that when you're scoring that rubric, it's important to understand that, a freshman's going to write different than a senior. So when you're looking at those, that more robust rubric, and you're looking at some of the levels of which students should be doing things, you need to take it into account of that lens of a freshman or a sophomore or junior or senior. And that was something that the narrator and I really worked hard to understand is, okay, this is freshman stuff. This is senior stuff. What's the difference between the 4 on the rubric for a senior and the 4 on the rubric for a freshman? To make sure that we were getting accurate data. And then these are just all the references. So in closing, there's a lot of information out there about graphic organizers. There's a lot of information out there about students organizing their thoughts. And as Dr. Gilson told me, it's a pretty vanilla topic. It's pretty played out. So when I worked with Dr. Forsyth initially, we had looked at doing something with eye tracking or something along those lines. And what we found out was that the MELs really became their own study in understanding how students critically think and analyze things and apply that going forward. And so I'm hoping that when I get done assessing all of the written responses, that we do see some sort of change. But, as we've said in class a lot of times, if there's not, it doesn't mean that the intervention failed or that the study failed. It just means that maybe it doesn't have the impact that we thought it was going to have. So with that, that's kind of where I am in terms of my process. My hope is to go through and assess all the stuff this summer, get the data all plugged in this summer, and then start to write and hopefully get this stuff ready to go for my dissertation committee middle of the fall and hopefully defend there towards the end of the fall. So yeah, thank you for your time and listening. And I know this video ran a little bit later than I wanted it to. But if you have any questions, you can always send me an email or let Dr. Booty know, and hopefully we can get connected that way. Thank you.